Welcome back to day 38 of our chess journey to 1500 ELO on chess.com. Let's just jump on ahead into our game and see who our opponent's going to be today. We get this, I think is our highest rated opponent by far, but they abort the game and we'll look for a new game. And now we get, I don't know if it's a capital I or an LBR 221 from Syria. Let's just jump on ahead and play 1d4. I think we'll go for this kind of Queen's Gambit type of setup. And now we have looked at this and then we capture if they go up. This is something I'm quite unfamiliar with, but I think we could just bring our bishop out and then develop normally, I think. And I think we should be in a decent spot. I'm curious as to whether this is the best approach or not, but we will see after the game, I think. This, and we just go back. We get another knight into the game. This is probably something they have seen before. I, however, don't think I have. I'm looking at this move, just developing our knight. And I think we'll go on ahead and play it. There might be an argument, I think, for playing this and placing 3 pawns in the center. I think we might go ahead and do this. I do kind of have an idea that, typically speaking, against those Indian defenses where they play this type of cramped setup, the C, D, and E pawns are oftentimes supposed to be pushed together in the main lines, at least. But now this bishop is a bit offside for the time being. I think, this knight move is probably going to happen either way here. And our bishop is probably the piece we want to delay developing because it might be a bit more flexible. Or rather, our ways of developing it might be a bit different, depending on our opponent's moves. Well, this does create somewhat of a threat. Now, if they move, we probably have to capture at least. I think we have to go e3 here. This traps our bishop, so we can't go for this diagonal. And I'm not seeing any tactics here, at least. There might be an argument, as I mentioned, for this move. But then in this case, well, that would work for us, to be honest. Because after this and this, we have this. This might not actually work. Let's have a look here. They won't capture, they will take here. We take, they take, and they will be up a pawn. So I think e3 is probably the best move, although this might be decent as well at some point. If it wasn't for that continuation we looked at, we might have probably played otherwise. Well, this, I think, it looks a bit awkward to me because this sets up their knight for potential discoveries, which I don't think we have any just now, but we might as time goes on. Well, we looked at this and we will go ahead and capture. I'm not seeing any moves that are all that interesting. We have to choose between those two bishop moves here, or potentially we might look at queenside castling, but I think that's a bit too committal here. I really want for some discoveries here to work out and pick up their knights here, but I'm not really seeing it. So honestly, it's either this or this move. Honestly, I'm not seeing a massive difference, but I think this might be a bit more active. And we don't have the threat of getting pinned here either, so we don't necessarily need to defend this knight. Could they castle? No, they go back. So which options do we have here then? Their bishop is still a bit awkward, and they haven't castled yet. But I don't think we should open up the board just yet. Here they could even ignore our threat, I think, and castle, because this doesn't do a whole lot in and of itself. It probably just wins them a stronger center and opens up the rook. So instead here I think we could look at castling. The reason I'm a bit hesitant here is because I would like to take over this diagonal, but I'm not seeing a good way of doing so. I think they will castle as well. Let's go on ahead and castle to a6. It seeks to prevent us from playing here. Is it too slow though? I think there is probably a pawn break here that's going to work. We just have to find which one. Alternatively, there could be an argument for getting our rooks into better files prior to making any pawn moves. This doesn't work. That's a free pawn. This doesn't do a whole lot either. I would like to gain some space, but I'm not seeing a whole lot to do after that. And as I mentioned, we might want to get our rooks into the game. So what I'm looking at here is connecting our rooks then, and getting our queen into the game. This also strengthens this diagonal here. However, there might be an argument for going like this. And if we go here, we can't do that. But I think we'll have to think about those ideas later on. And we will see after the game here whether this was a good move or not. Now this move tells me a whole lot. What this is our opponent probably wants to castle along, or rather on the king side, because this might be a bit weakening. Although they could play a5 and have an okay structure still. In terms of king safety at least. Now what I'm looking at here is a continuation like this, for example. But I'm not necessarily seeing what we would gain from that. As I mentioned, I want control over this diagonal, but this I think doesn't favor us after this. Or does it? Well, that's kind of difficult, I think, to evaluate. Do we have a pawn move, or should we go for a piece activity here? I think typically speaking, my strengths as a player are in positional games where we have traded some pawns. I'm not all that good at finding the best moves when all the pawns are still on the board. So let's have a look. We will try to go for this, but I think one of the rook moves might have been better here. This, I'm realizing, doesn't do a whole lot, because they could replace their knight. How about something like this? That doesn't work just now. This would seek to shut down this bishop. And then how would we follow up? Now let's look at this actually. I'm noticing this might be interesting. And playing this move to go for d5. Simply gaining space here and shutting off their bishop. Now our bishop would be weakened as well here, but we could at least remaneuver it, whereas our opponent can't do a whole lot with that bishop. Now, do they have d5 here? If we play, let's say like this, then they would have to capture this way, and we could pin their queen. So I don't necessarily think that works. Now, does an immediate d5 work here? I think I like the idea at least. Alternatively, we might look at some kingside attack at some point, but first let's just play this. Takes, and we could grab this file with a tempo, hitting their queen, and then create this pawn chain. Then I think most of the play here in this game would probably happen on the king side afterwards, unless they go for a lot of pawn breaks. Now we could look at potential rook lifts here as well. But we get this pawn move. Now what happens if we just jump in with our knight here? They take, we take, they take, we take, and then they take, and they would be up a pawn. This move, however, I think I'm liking a lot. This pawn is hanging. If they take, we take, they take, we take, they take, but then they would defend it. So what happens if we go here? They take, we take, they take, and we take here perhaps. If they take here, they can't capture a piece as we pin them to the queen. So I think this might be an okay move. There is a lot of tension here though, but that's always interesting. Now, what happens if we capture here? They capture, we capture, and we might be up a pawn. I'm not seeing a compelling reason as to why we wouldn't go for this. Takes, 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 and takes. They would get some activity here though. What happens if we take here and then push up? Then our bishop might become a beast. But then they could take here, we would be even in material, but our bishop I think would kind of offside that material. Or rather, it would, I think, net us a slight advantage at least. Now it's important to note here we haven't looked at any captures here in this position. But then I think we might just be able to capture. I think it's important we have the option of playing a4 here. What happens here? Then we could go back and this would be defended against a rook move. And we have outside passed pawns. Now if they play like this, I think an immediate a4 might be playable. However, I think I prefer... I would have liked this if it was possible, but they would have this. Or would they? We could just capture, I think, and that might be okay. But what happens here? Yeah, that's okay for us. So let's look at this. This. What happens here? Well, that's no good. We wouldn't want to drop this pawn, I think. Now what happens if we get hit with this and we go here then? That doesn't quite work. So a4 might be our best move here. And if they take, we have to take like this, and our pawns will be a bit awkward, but we will still be up a pawn and they will be passed pawns. This is never going to work. We would lose our queen. Let's try to look a bit closer at this position. Simply because I think there might be some threats here. If we go here, they might have bishop to d5 hitting our queen. Let's go a4. I'm not really loving this, but we are still up a pawn, and we could generate a lot of threats along the A and B files. We do have to move our queen though. Now this I think isn't all that bad. Now we keep our pawns connected. So they get a pawn back, but we have threats on this side. Just advancing our pawns. But we have to play a bit quicker than what I'm currently doing. I think I would like to move the queen out of the way here and get our rooks up. This would support a potential knight maneuver, and I don't want to place it on this file. So let's go like this. This loses a bishop. I think most likely here our next move is going to be rook f to c1, grabbing this file. And then we could look at simplifying by forking those pieces here, so we could potentially go on ahead and grab their bishop, we would trade, and then the fewer pieces on the board, I think the more happy we are going to be with those pawns here, as I think their value is higher than those in the middle. Simply because of the threat of making a queen. This move I didn't quite expect. What is the threat here? They're looking to fork us. Do we have a way of defending our bishop then? This gets hit. But this does not. But they would take, and this would double our pawns. And that's honestly not all that good for us. So here I think this looks quite awkward. But I think I prefer this. This might not be the best move, but I didn't like what would have happened here afterwards, after this fork. They still go for the knight move. And how are we going to move our queen here? I think I like this square here, as it controls a lot and just doesn't get easily hit by anything. They might go for this check, but I'm not seeing a good follow-up. We would just slide on over. But then this move. And this might be a bit dangerous. Is this a forced mate? Or a loss of a queen at best? I'm really hoping it's not. I might have been a bit too quick here with our move, thinking they might not have any threats against us. Let's look a bit closer here. Here I think we would have to block. Simply because we can't allow this configuration of their pieces. Now this knight doesn't have a whole lot of good squares. Let's go here. There is a potential fork here, but we would lose this pawn in the process. Oh, that's not something I want to click. If our opponent made a move there, we might have lost the game. Now, do they have an idea here of infiltrating? They might. And then what would we do? This looks too awkward. Rook a b1 might be the best response. Because we still want the c file for our other rook, I think. I might be wrong though. I don't want to disconnect our rooks by playing this at least, and I'm not seeing any other good responses apart from defending the pawn. Pushing it, I think, doesn't quite work, because this does allow quite active knight play here. After they go here, and we go here, what happens after this? I'm not seeing a whole lot. This still hits this pawn. But do we have this fork now? This would sack the pawn entirely though. And I'm not all that happy sacking that rook. Sorry, that pawn. So we might go for this. We just have to play a bit quickly here as we are running out of time every single move here almost. Our opponent still has a lot of time, so we have to try to predict their moves as we calculate. What would I play here? Well, that's not something that was on my radar. What happens here? They would have to go back. This, I think, we would win the trade in some way, but not in others. Actually, I think this might be okay. I'm not convinced, but it probably forces the rook back if they don't want potentially getting 2 pawns and a bishop for the rook. That might be good for our opponent, but it's a bit difficult to evaluate. Now this would have been nice, but I'm not seeing a good follow-up. How about getting this rook into the game? Could we hit our opponent's queen? This just helps them get to a better square, I think. So let's go on ahead and play this. I have been looking at this move for a while, and I'm not quite sure as to how I would want to respond. Potentially here, I think, I might want to look at, is this a good move here? Is there an argument for sacking here? This hits our bishop in 2 different ways. This, I think we have to keep our defense of this pawn. So let's jump in like this. And now I think this might be a move at some point. Either way here, I think this is quite the position. We want our queen on a better square, and now that our opponent's knight has jumped back, that might actually be possible even. This is not a threat by our opponent, I think. They can't take our bishop. So now I think we might be able to push. It's going to be a bit difficult positioning this rook now because of our bishop. They might have to go back to b8. They don't. But now this looks a bit awkward. Do we have a fork here? I'm not seeing how they would respond to this fork. I don't have time to fully calculate this, but it's looking good, at least on first glance, or at first glance here. And this might be a winning move. Because this rook is trapped, they have to take. This doesn't work, this doesn't work. And here I think I'm genuinely not seeing the response. There might be a good response here though, and our opponent has a lot of time to find it, and I will have to look for the same. They take here, sacking. But now this should be pretty good, I think. Now we keep this pawn alive, and their queen is hit. We forced our opponent to sack their knight. They can't take here because their queen is hanging. But we have to make a mental note that our bishop might be hanging as well. They can't hit our rook along this diagonal. Could they go here and hit our rook? Then those two pieces here would be hanging. Honestly, this is not hanging, I'm noticing. For some reason I forgot we defended it. Okay, how about... Just have to play quickly here though. They are looking to trap our bishop. Does this work? It does lose a pawn, I'm noticing. What happens here? I might be blundering in this position. I really hope I'm not throwing the game here. Let's move in with our queen. Now everything is defended at least, but our bishop is still in a somewhat awkward position. We are still up material though, but our time situation is looking quite dire. This is controlled by their queen. Are we able to evacuate? Let's move on over and lose our rook apparently. Yeah, this is not ideal. I have this unfortunate habit of blundering in under time pressure, but I hope we might have some chance here. However, our king is quite awkwardly positioned. I think at worst this is a perpetual, but now this doesn't work. This loses the game. They find a move here that wins our queen. And this would be difficult to come back from. But I am curious here, when we look into the game review afterwards, how we should have played differently and at which point we did blunder, because I think we had a pretty good position after grabbing their knight, which we forced them to sack. Now here I don't think I'll force our opponent to play out, so I'll go on ahead and say well played to them. Well played. I'll just put a capital I. I don't know if it's an L or not. And then we will go on ahead and resign. Now this brings us back under 1400 ELO. But that's no problem, we are still learning. So which accuracies did we have today? We played with 76.7 and our opponent played with 82.0. This is an opening I'm not quite familiar with. This was apparently a mistake, but I think we might have been in a similar position here and played the same mistake. Knight to f3 is the best move and would have netted us a decent advantage. This still isn't all that bad. We should have went back with the bishop even, because this is apparently a really awkward position for it. Here we had to capture. Most of the moves here are decent, but the computer did like the idea I looked at apparently. Just getting the bishop back. Or at least it does say so with the green arrow. I'm not finding the move up here. E4, A4 and knight to D2. We jumped in, which was a slight mistake. In this position we should have went for an immediate E4, which we did see this idea afterwards, but we shouldn't have played it in this way. They castled, and here we went up. This was an okay move, but we should have captured here. Let's have a quick look. Rook A to D1, and we would have went after this pawn as it couldn't have advanced. Well, it does make sense. I did not see that. Okay, we went here, and we got into this position. Now here, this was a bad move, but I didn't see our follow-up. Yeah, I don't know how I thought this knight would move to this square. That's just me completely overlooking that. This is... For some reason, I'm like, yeah, this fork here is incredibly dangerous. Yeah, that's not happening. We split our pawns intentionally, apparently. But here I didn't see our move after this. Well, this is... I didn't see this for some reason. And this would have forced an awkward structure for our opponent too. But this knight would have been a menace as well. Let's go back to the position we did play, however. We got into this position, and here we found some okay moves. We should have apparently hit the queen here. I'm just now noticing why. This would have probably been a blunder, for example, going in here. I'm looking at this sec. This might not have been all that good, but it's at least in the balance. Well, we went like this, grabbing the open file. This was the best move. This wasn't quite it, however. It was still okay, pretty close to the best move. And this was a mistake. Apparently this wasn't the best. This queen move was still recommended by the engine. Now what would have happened here? After this check, king to h1, and let's say this, disconnecting our pieces. Queen to d4, and we would have just bulldozed on in, apparently. I did not see that. We went into this, and here, well, we did have the material advantage. This was almost the best move, so apparently this pawn here was going to be lost either way. I looked at this move, but it didn't make a lot of sense to me, as I thought we are cutting our queen out of the activity, or rather its potential squares. This would close down any ideas for our queen. This was our mistake, though. We had a lot of good moves, but Quite characteristically, I made a blunder under time pressure, playing this move and losing to this fork. But now I am curious, what should we have played here in this position? We should have went to the B file with this rook, which makes a lot of sense. Or we should have went to B1 with the other rook. I think if I had looked at this position, I think this is what I would have done to allow our bishop back into the game. Because here it would be protected by two rooks going back. Well, this is quite awkward, but those games happen, and yeah, this is just a forced mate. Or a forced loss at least. Well, thanks a lot for the game once again. I or L BR221 from Syria, I think. That's our game for today, guys. Thanks a lot for watching, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. Bye bye.